Laura Stevenson, Colin Cowherd on sports, and Karen Roberts with the weather. This is News 3, the Weekend Report.
Good evening. New Year's celebrations in southern Utah turned into nightmares for hundreds of people.
A large dam broke during the night, releasing a wall of water.
Lonnie Levitt is in St. George and joins us with the latest. Lonnie, how bad is it down there?
Well, Governor Norm Bangeter, Utah's governor, flew out this morning, surveyed the area, and has declared it a disaster area. They even shut down I-15 from St. George to Las Vegas for most of the day, and it really backed up traffic, caused a few accidents to divert it around. There were also several bridges wiped out, and the main road to Zion's National Park has been destroyed, so that's going to cause some problems down the road. Also, a large natural gas line that supplies the St. George area was destroyed. Now, the apartment complex that we're at is one of the ones that was the hardest hit. The people here told me their cars were floating down the street, they had water up to their windows, and there was even a 6-foot cinder block wall that surrounded the area, and now that is in shambles. It was completely crumbled. You can't even see it in some places. The water came through here and left everything in a complete mess. It could have been a lot worse. It was a secondary dam at Quail Creek Reservoir. Engineers say if the main dam had crumbled, there'd be flooding in Las Vegas. Dave Morrow was on the scene when the dam gave way.
Very scary. It looked like the Colorado River at flood stage to me, and at night it even was more awesome. There was a very large volume of water flowing down towards the highway, and it was churning violently.
The dam is right outside of St. George, and it didn't take long until houses and apartments were in the path of the mud, water, and debris. Authorities evacuated hundreds of homes.
The policeman came about a little before midnight and banged on the door to wake us up. We had just gone to bed and told us to leave. So we took what we needed for the night and left.
But one man didn't hear the calls to leave until it was too late.
The water was starting to come up over it, and it was starting to come in the floorboard there. I said, forget that, so I got out, and then the water was up to my waist, and it got a little swifter, a little heavier, and then I got up on top of the hood, and I rode it down. The car was floating, I rode it down.
He gave up on his car and escaped the raging water. This afternoon, residents returned to their apartments only to find their furniture and carpet covered with mud.
Rather shaky and near tears. I'm tired.
Now, there's no telling how long it's going to take to clean all of this up. They had volunteers organized and out all day just trying to pack up people's belongings. And one volunteer told me today was the easy part. Tomorrow they start in on the cleaning. Now, there haven't been any damage estimates yet, except one man did tell me it took them $5 million to build the dam itself that broke. And it's going to take them a lot more to repair it because they're going to do it completely differently. They're going to add concrete this time. Before it was completely made out of earth. There's nothing that they can do at this point as far as fixing the dam. They have to just let the water run. They can't stop it. Back to you, Dave.
Lonnie, you said that I-15 traffic was backed up and also several bridges were down. How bad is traffic in the area? Are people able to move at all, or is it just at a standstill?
Well, no, the traffic has cleared up because they have reopened I-15. They did that just a few hours ago. Before, they were having people diverted around the old highway before I-15 was built. It's only a 2-lane highway, so people were backed all the way up.
All right, Lonnie Levitt live in St. George, Utah. Thanks, Lonnie. Well, it took 9 hours for the swell of water to fan from the Quail Creek dike down to the Nevada-Arizona border. Officially, the flood damage it caused in those areas is being termed minor, but the victims feel it's the wrong way to start the new year.
And Lynn Mathis is here with a report of what happened when the water flowed into Mesquite and Littlefield here in Nevada. Lynn?
Laura, David, when it hit the Nevada-Arizona border, by then it had spread out so much. The good news is it was not nearly as bad as originally expected, but the bad news is the outflow from the dam break left a muddy mess and an angry group of victims behind. The lower areas of Overton, Logandale, and Bunkerville were evacuated, and the little town of Littlefield, Arizona was hit pretty hard.
Boom. Just all hit at once. Can't happen to us. It's got to happen to somebody else.
It's a horrible mess. A muddy carpet blankets yards and driveways of a few homes built near the Virgin River in Littlefield. The wall of water here was 4 feet high. It was so forceful it buckled the walls of one little house. Inside another, Christmas memories are literally a washout, and mud pies are the only holiday surprises in this kitchen tonight. Residents returned to find their possessions ruined. There aren't enough adjectives in the English language to describe their disgust. This was one instance where they say they got evacuation orders too soon. They wish they would have stayed around to save more.
Between 11 and midnight, 3 of them come up to their door and knocked on the door and says, "Hey, you got to get out.
There's a flood
Just the dam broke. You got to get out." And then it didn't hit until 9 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
Only a few pieces of furniture can be saved here, and the Red Cross will help these devastated victims try to rebuild their lives. The floodwaters pushed their way to Bunkerville, 10 miles away. The once Clearwater Virgin River now carries thousands of tree stumps. For those whose homes are not damaged, it is a time for sightseeing.
It's just something you just never expect to happen in the Virgin River. But of course we forget about the dams above us in St. George, I guess.
You want to see just how much water there really was. That's why we stopped here on the way home. We wanted to see what it was that did hit our place.
Officials kept a close watch on the flood here, but waters didn't get quite as high as expected in this area, and it seems the Bunkerville Bridge was one of just a few here that was spared the wrath of the Quail Creek dam break. Whatever floodwater wasn't soaked into the earth or into somebody's home did flow into the Overton arm of Lake Mead. It is expected to cause absolutely no problem there, just added a few inches to the water level. Certainly, Laura, there wasn't enough to have an impact on Hoover Dam. No stress.
Lynn, what about heroes, rescuers? Did anybody brave the elements and try to go in and pull people out of all that?
You bet they did. It's amazing looking at some of the footage we shot that no one was hurt. Search and Rescue told me their helicopter spotted 15 duck hunters, totally unaware of the dam break, sitting down there waiting, and they were all saved.
How soon after the dam broke did the folks in Littlefield find out that there was trouble on the way?
They got the call right away at about midnight. As it turned out, like the one man said, the water didn't hit them till 8 or 9 this morning, so it's kind of too bad they didn't save more of their furniture before they got out.
This is Channel 2, Salt Lake City. All tonight's news with Kathy Brock, John Stairs, Steve Root has weather, and Dave Fox, the sports. This is KUTV News.
Good evening. Southwest Utah is bailing itself out of a flash flood disaster tonight.
The earthen dike surrounding the Quail Creek Reservoir broke in the first hours of the new year. Water raced through the canyon, destroying property but sparing lives. KUTV's Kelly Love joins us live via KUTV News Star from St. George. Kelly, what's the situation there tonight?
Well, Kathy, it appears that the panic has subsided in St. George and in the nearby communities, like the floodwaters from that reservoir 12 miles east of town. The main road from Hurricane to Zions National Park is still closed tonight, will be for some time. A bridge there washed out. A half-dozen bridges were washed away in that wall of water. I-15 in both directions to Nevada is open tonight, some 18 hours after that earthen wall gave way, flooding the canyon downstream at least 45 miles. Water from the Quail Creek Reservoir made its escape, tunneling through an earthen wall. The reservoir lies 12 miles from St. George. Locals who live downstream have always questioned its safety. The dike has leaked from the very beginning. Developers said it was no cause for alarm. Contractors routinely patched the dike, pouring concrete. And after years of problems, the dike finally gave way shortly after midnight Sunday. Residents had nearly 4 hours, however, to prepare. A 10-foot wall of water crashed down the canyon, crossing 3 state lines. Flash floods forced 1,500 people from their homes. Some families were trapped as the water cut off major roads, sweeping bridges downstream. Livestock died as the water swamped farm and grazing lands. The governor declared Washington County a disaster area.
We flew down the channel all the way through, and there are some bridges that have been taken out, some farmland's been inundated. Some cattle have been lost from all accounts, and we've lost some bridges.
Hundreds of families scrambled in the first hours of the new year, trying to stay ahead of the advancing river. As the water recedes, cleanup begins. Sunday church services are canceled as hundreds of volunteers help neighborhoods hit hardest. The water line reaches basement ceilings. Damage in each home near the river canyon exceeds thousands of dollars. Water claims carpeting, furniture, personal papers, and mementos.
It was incredible. I mean, you had to kind of like pinch yourself and say, this happens to other people, it's not real. And we just kind of stood around the house going, what do we take? What do we take?
Guy could be a lot worse. He could have lost his house altogether, and then, you know, he'd feel a whole lot worse about it. I feel good about not losing any more than I did.
And I just stood there and I just thought, well, what do I pack? Clothes, baby clothes. Baby clothes, get my kids. My kids were terribly upset, and so we just packed as much as we could, and the family pictures and books, getting the books up and things like that, the most important things.
Many don't know if their insurance will cover the damages. They've been told over the years they don't live in the floodplains. They ask who will pay, who is responsible.
Engineers will tour the site tomorrow and try to figure out what triggered this and make a judgment call. Who, if anyone, is responsible for this mess? Kathy?
Kelly, it looks like there's a lot of damage. Has anyone taken a guess on exactly how much monetarily? Have they put a price tag on what's happened?
No one's even begun to. There are so many homes that have some damage or whatever, it's tough to tell. Kathy?
Very much, Kelly. KUTV's Kelly Love reporting from St. George. The Quail Creek dike disaster may have hurt more than homes and property. According to officials with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, at least 2 endangered species of fish lived in that reservoir. Today's accident could mean big problems for fish in the river.
How much damage this wall of water that came down and the destruction of the habitat that occurred in that section of the river, we won't know until we evaluate it, but we can anticipate that we suffered some significant losses, probably of woundfin in that stretch of the river.
Allison Hayren, John Dupree, climatologist Clayton Bruff, and sports with Wesley Rupp.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the new year. I'm John Dupree.
And I'm Allison Hayren. Good evening. Some St. George residents have been saying it might happen for years, and last night it did. Around midnight, the Quail Creek dike on the Virgin River above St. George gave way. A 12-foot wall of water rushed downstream, flooding the communities below. Cindy Burns is standing by live in St. George with the story. Cindy, what are the victims of the disaster doing tonight?
Well, Allison, of the 1,500 people who were evacuated in the wee hours of the morning, some have actually been allowed to go back to their homes and apartments. Others, though, are staying with family and friends. There is emergency shelter available, but so far very few people have had to take advantage of it. Now, for some families, the water knocked out electrical power. For others, it knocked out sewer lines or water lines. For others, though, it left their entire homes completely unlivable. As many people have been saying today, this was certainly no way to start 1989. While most of St. George was preparing to ring in the new year, 15 miles north of town, 25,000 acre-feet of water was cutting a path of destruction. By daylight, you could see just how much of the dike was gone. The water took out 6 bridges and weakened others as far south as Arizona. At 11 o'clock last night, engineers knew the dike was going to go. They wasted no time getting the word out.
Lots of sirens, police going along with a big bullhorn warning everybody.
Authorities evacuated 1,500 Washington County residents along the floodwaters path. But there was nothing this cattleman could do to save his herd from being washed away like so many toothpicks. To the south, Bloomington and Bloomington Ranch were some of the area's hardest hit. Water and mud filled this basement to the ceiling at one point.
Take it, hand up.
The damage was so heavy, local churches canceled services today so members could help friends and families clean up. And that job will not be easy. This was a swimming pool. This yard was covered with thick grass. And this was new carpet just 18 months ago. But despite the losses, most people were smiling on this first day of 1989. They all came out alive.
We got everybody out of the area and had safe places for them to go to remain until the crisis was over.
If If you can believe this, by now that water has traveled about 80 miles south. It will eventually end up in Lake Mead in Nevada. Now, the governor came here today. He toured the area and declared it a disaster area immediately. Tomorrow, several officials will meet to decide whether they can get some federal disaster relief money to help these people out. They don't know, though, how much money they'll need. They have no clear damage estimates yet, and they have no idea how long it will take to clean all this up.
Cindy, I overheard in some of the video that you sent back earlier people saying that they didn't think they had flood insurance to cover the damages. Are they asking that tonight? Who will pay the cost of all this damage?
Oh, certainly. Everyone wants to know. Some people are just going to take what comes. They know that they should have gotten flood insurance but avoided it because they felt they lived in a desert area. Some people are covered. Tomorrow they're going to get a much clearer picture of what is going on when they have all these emergency meetings. They'll figure out how to help people through this very difficult time.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. That's Cindy Burns live in St. George tonight. And the flood also caused some problems for traffic on this holiday Sunday. A 40-mile stretch of Interstate 15 south of St. George was closed until early this evening, not because of water on the road, but because officials were checking for possible damage to bridges in the narrow Virgin River Gorge. Those structures have been declared safe. The outlook for State Road 9 between St. George and Hurricane isn't as good, however. Both the Barry and Washington City bridges were wiped out. It could be some time before that road is reopened. John?
Well, news of today's flood is not the first time the Quail Creek Reservoir has attracted statewide attention. Russ Behrman has been in Washington County since long before dawn today. He joins us now live via Skylink. Russ, the dam's construction has been the focus of some controversy for years now, hasn't it?
Well, indeed. It's a relatively brief history, though. It's been a hot topic, and not only in the construction but other topics in Washington County. Today's events seem only to set the stage for more controversy.
Before the project began in 1983, there were accusations of land grabbing, environmental concerns, and some big questions about safety. Many locals believe the geology in the area demanded more than a simple earthen dike and dam. The rock is porous and brittle, but engineers believe those and other problems could be overcome.
There's no place in this area that's not a difficult area just because of the many faults, and you know, we're sitting very close to the Hurricane Fault, which is one of the major geologic uplifts of all time.
The dike has leaked since it was finished in 1985. Not uncommon for earthen dams, but not comforting for angry residents.
We've all heard the rumors that there's been leaks, and we've seen water coming out of the dam, and they say that's just a natural flow. But I can't believe that that's a natural flow, what it did to our house.
Sentiments like those may create even more controversy in the future, and Quail Creek apparently will have a future.
Question will be asked, will we rebuild? The answer to that has to be an unequivocal yes. That's what we do in Utah, is we rebuild when we have difficulties.
Now, Governor Bangerter is asking for a complete engineering review to make sure that the new dike or dam would be a safe one. However, this is a critical need, water in this area, and especially with all the development that he would like to see, and so it will be a very important process, and the desire for that water will certainly speed the process of having that renewed. John?
Russ, we do know that leaks in that dike were considered years ago to be quite serious. What's been done during that time to repair those leaks?
Engineers have been working for 3 years. They've been drilling deep holes and filling them with kind of a concrete mixture, trying to shore up the dam. Indeed, the dam originally, or the dike originally cost $1.5 million. The repairs equaled that. And just 2 days ago, the engineers completed that and had reduced the leaking to a point where they considered the problem to be totally gone. They claim that the break in the dam or dike this morning was a complete surprise.
All right. Thanks, Russ. Reporting live from St. George via Skylink, Russ Behrman.
Just after midnight, an earthen dam at the Quail Creek Reservoir near St. George broke, sending a 12-foot wall of water cascading down the Virgin River. There is now a 300-foot hole where the dike used to be. The floodwater surged through some 50 homes and 100 apartments in the St. George area. Up to 1,500 people were evacuated from their places earlier, but many have returned to their homes tonight. Luckily, nobody was injured, but damage is estimated in the millions of dollars as farmers watched their land and livestock wash away. The flood became quite a tourist attraction once the sun came up.
Reporter Robert Walls has been on this story all night and joins us now via Star West 5. What do they think caused the break, Bob?
Well, Carol, that's something that no one really seems to know right now. In fact, investigators say it's something that could take quite a while to find out. Quail Creek Reservoir is located northeast of St. George, near the town of Hurricane. The dam is used mostly for recreation and irrigation, although Washington County is currently building a water treatment plant here. The dike surrounding the south end of the reservoir broke, causing extensive damage and the loss of a valuable water resource in this desert area. Crews tried to stabilize the leaking dike, but it didn't take long for the churning water to cut a huge cavern. The floodwaters that poured from the gaping hole tore up roads, bridges, and anything else in its path. The once quiet Virgin River became a mass of whitewater and debris. The water spread quickly, covering homes and businesses with 4 to 6 feet of mud and slop.
All you can do is get in and dig some more. Get it dug out. We've got a lot of people helping us.
The floodwater swept beneath Interstate 15 with such force, highway officials feared it weakened bridge supports. After inspection, Utah Governor Norman Bangerter and other state engineers closed the road, keeping those on the Nevada side in Nevada and those on the Utah side in Utah.
So I apologize, but that's what we got to do.
So can we turn right?
You can just kind of back up here and just turn around just on the other side of this little bush.
Most people were awake, celebrating the new year when the floodwater hit, so the evacuation went smoothly without any serious injury. But when the water level dropped, property owners found little to cheer about on the first day of 1989.
Salt Lake destroyed our furniture while a new home's being built. Everything we own is in there.
You're kidding.
Piano, china closet, everything.
The mishap started with a small leak, but some say the dike has always leaked. News specialist Joel Munson takes a look at some of the reservoir's past problems.
The Quail Creek Reservoir has provoked plenty of controversy in its short lifetime. While hardly anyone here questioned the need for water in this part of the country, many questioned the dam's location and the soil's ability to hold back 40,000 acre-feet of water.
The old-timers told them when they built it that it wouldn't last very long.
Apparently, the old-timers were right, because now there's a 200-foot wide hole in the south wall of the Quail Creek Reservoir. But before there was a hole, there were plenty of leaks in this earthen dam. Shortly after its dedication in 1985, state officials suddenly had to drain the man-made lake because of a structural problem, and that was only the beginning. Starting several months ago, water started oozing from the very dike that collapsed last night.
It's been leaking since they built it, so I don't know whether it just finally broke through or what.
Still, state officials say they have confidence that the dam can be rebuilt safely in this very same spot.
The question will be asked, will we rebuild? I think the answer to that has to be an unequivocal yes. That's what we do in Utah, is we rebuild when we have difficulties.
But local residents say state leaders are going to have to do more than rebuild the reservoir. They're going to have to rebuild public confidence in the structure as well. Joel Munson, Eyewitness News, Quail Creek Reservoir.
People displaced by the flood are wondering how this could happen and who's going to pay for the damages. But even though it ruined the holiday, for many, they're glad the New Year's flood wasn't any worse. Keith and Carol?
Bob, a lot of floodwaters damaged homes and destroyed a lot of property. How are those evacuees doing this evening?
Well, they seem to be doing quite well. It's kind of mixed the way that they're taking it. Some seem to be taking it quite well. Others are quite upset. They say this was a man-caused disaster rather than a natural disaster. They think the ones who built the dam should be responsible for paying for the damages.
Bob, you're standing by the reservoir right now tonight. How is the water level behind you? What's it doing?
Well, the water level, as you can see, is way down from where it was in our pictures that we showed early this morning as the sun was coming up. They say that the water level will continue to drop until the outlet here that...
And Randolph with weather. And Steve Cyphers with sports.
Good evening, I'm Keith McCord.
And I'm Shelley Osterloh. Dick and Bruce have the day off. A team of federal emergency investigators spent the day in St. George assessing damage caused by the flood of the Quail Creek Reservoir. The wall of water from a dike destroyed homes, roads, and farms throughout Washington County. Damage estimates are in the millions of dollars. Federal investigators met with state and local officials today to find out exactly where all the damaged areas are. Everyone in St. George is anxious to rebuild, but federal investigators say don't count on a check from Uncle Sam just yet.
by us being here, does not automatically trigger individual assistance programs to help people recover from this disaster. It does not automatically trigger money programs to come in and help local governments recover. We're here simply to assess the damage.
Investigators will stay in St. George for the next several days to take a thorough look at the damage caused by the flood.
For many St. George residents, today wasn't much different than yesterday. It was house cleaning, cleaning up and shoveling out muck and mud from a New Year's guest that nobody wanted. About 200 volunteers organized by the LDS Church turned out with shovels and wheelbarrows and pickup trucks today and a lot of heavy equipment to lend a hand wherever they were needed. Reporter Robert Walls is on one of the streets that was hard hit down in southern Utah. Bob, what's the latest tonight?
Well, Keith, most of the shock and panic caused by the flood has gone down in this neighborhood, just as most of the water has. Now people are pulling together for the undesirable task of cleaning up the mess. None of these people planned to spend the holiday cleaning up someone else's house. So what were you going to do today?
Just go out on the mountain bike and go in the hills.
That's what you were going to do?
Yeah.
Well, how come you're here?
Bishop called me up and said, "You want to come help clean up?"
But the plight of those hit by the Quail Creek dam break brought out volunteers from miles around.
I've never met these people, no. I never met the ones that helped yesterday, but they're all good people and they need help.
Sherry and Scott Hansen built this home 5 months ago. It wasn't easy to helplessly watch as the floodwaters washed around it.
I haven't really cried about the whole thing yet. It hasn't hit me. But when I see all these people coming, that's when I get serious.
There's no shortage of manpower around here today. Volunteers not only worked tirelessly cleaning up, but brought their own lunch. It'll cost the Hansens about $70,000 to undo what the flood did. Scott Hansen says the mishap may have dented his wallet, but not his sense of humor.
We thought, what did we do to deserve this? But then we thought of 3 or 4 things, and so we thought, well, we can't use that line of reasoning.
Well, even tonight, volunteers are not quitting. Just behind me here, there's people out bringing food to workers who are still trying to clean up the area, and people are trying to pull together and get the area cleaned up as best they can.
Yeah, Bob, we can see people in the background. Looks like they'll be working all night. Do residents down there want to see this dike rebuilt?
Well, everyone that I have talked to said that they want the dike rebuilt because they need the water down here. This is the desert. They need it for drinking purposes. But they all say this time if they rebuild it, they want it to stay. Of course, when you live downstream from a dike, you certainly want to make sure that something like this isn't going to happen again.
Indeed. Bob, is everyone back in their homes tonight?
Not everyone is back in. Most of the people who can live on the upper floors of their homes are back in. It was mostly basements that were damaged. There's some people in apartments that were not able to go back in and some homes that were damaged extensively. But most of the people who were evacuated are back, and others have been taken care of by friends or relatives in the area.
All right, thank you very much, Bob Walls.
How much of a role did gypsum salts play in the soil in yesterday's dike break? Well, ever since Quail Creek was first proposed, engineers have wondered about the gypsum. In fact, gypsum has caused problems in other dams and reservoirs built in other parts of the country. When gypsum is dry, it poses no problems. It just blends in with the rest of the dirt and rock. But when it gets wet, it dissolves and leaves holes in the rocks, holes which water can flow through and cause erosion. Engineers
try to determine what happened at the Quail Creek Reservoir.
In the aftermath of Sunday's flood, residents and farmers are counting their losses. Damage estimates may exceed $40 million. We have 2 reports tonight from KUTV's Larry Warren and Kelly Love. First, Kelly Love.
A steady stream of engineers peered into the gaping hole surrounding Quail Creek Reservoir, looking for answers. The break triggered a multitude of problems in Washington County. No one is sure who will pay for the exorbitant bill. A 10-foot wall of water crashed through farmlands and subdivisions. It destroyed bridges and crossed 3 state lines. Residents continue to bail out from the floods. The first hours of the new year etched permanently in their minds.
It was not a good way to start a new year.
Power has been restored to neighborhoods hit hardest. But near the dam itself, floods ripped electricity, gas, and sewage lines from the ground. The water sliced through bridges and roads.
The remnants of State Road 9 lay crumpled alongside the Virgin River Canyon. This is the major thoroughfare to Zion's National Park from hurricane. The road is closed, at least a mile of it washed away. the bridge washed away by Sunday's flood.
A third of the water remains in Quail Creek Reservoir, but the recreation season is over. State officials say the dike must be rebuilt. It attracts tourism. It supplies water downstream, the only water source in Dixie. City leaders know the importance of the dam. They also understand the opposition.
Well, I'm sure there's frustration, and there'll be questions asked why the dam was built there and whether there was previous notice and all that stuff. And I don't know what those answers are as far as what actually caused the problem. All I know is that in my position, I think in the city's position, is that the dam has to be rebuilt.
Some residents say they'll be skeptical of any promises the dike will ever be safe. Kelly Love, KUTV News.
It was dedicated just 3 years ago amid hopes it would provide water and recreation for growing Washington County. But soon, St. George leaders said the dissolved minerals in the water made it too hard for culinary use. There were allegations that local officials made big real estate profits by getting the dam built where it was. And early on, there were indications of potential problems at the Quail Creek site, including persistent leaks, which required partial draining and additional repairs. Engineer and former U.S. Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner Ellis Armstrong surveyed the site for a dam in the 60s. He ruled it out because he thought the site was too small and it contained deposits of gypsum.
There were some formations that had this gypsum, and of course, whenever you can, you try to keep away from gypsum when there are other possibilities. It dissolves over time when it's wetted and dissolves and flows away. it leaves problems.
Then state geologist Bruce Calliser warned in a 1983 memo, quote, "The shallow subsurface beneath the dike contains gypsum beds at least 1/4 inch thick. A potential problem exists with dissolution of the gypsum." Natural Resources Director Dee Hansen was the state engineer who approved plans to proceed despite the concerns about underlying gypsum deposits.
Fairly deep. It did not appear that it would be a major concern, at least according to the design consultant. They felt that it could be adequately controlled. One of the thoughts in the design was that you could isolate the water away from the gypsum enough that it would not dissolve. We're not sure that's why it failed.
That's one problem in the investigation. The very evidence of what went wrong, the dike itself, washed downstream. Quail Creek Reservoir was born in controversy and is washing out the same way. But Southwest Utahns worry that growth cannot continue without water. Dam builders like Armstrong say with the proper homework, dams can be built with more assurance of safety than Quail Creek.
There's always a risk. This isn't a risk-free world, but you can build a dam that's pretty safe with the right methodologies and a thorough investigation.
When that assessment is finished by FEMA at the end of the week, officials will then turn their findings over to Governor Bangerter. It will then be up to him to decide whether to ask for a national or a federal emergency declaration. Even if he does that, though, FEMA could still override him. Everything's very much up in the air, though, and we'll have to wait and see how that turns out.
Cindy, has anybody really determined yet why that dam failed?
No, not definitely, but there are rumors running rampant today that it was some kind of structural, not structural problem, but much underneath, actually in the foundation itself. Not in anything man-made, not in the fill or in the concrete, but in the ground itself.
Are they still talking about rebuilding it even with the unstable foundation of it?
Oh, absolutely. They're saying all they'll need to do perhaps is dig even deeper into the foundation, shore it up better, and try again.
All right. Cindy Burns reporting live tonight from near St. George. Okay.
Well, besides the damage to roads and bridges, it is impossible to put a price tag on the personal losses. Our news crews have spent 2 days with victims, and one thing they're noticing is how all the residents are banding together.
Nearly every lower-level apartment in the Riverside complex was hit, and hit hard. Some things survived the flood.
There they are. Looks like they survived.
Others did not. Arlene Heaton manages Riverside. She knows most of her tenants by name.
The thing that makes it sad is because of the people that you care for.
I don't just rent to these people. We're just like a big family here.
And they are pulling together like a family. Anyone who needed help today got it. Even school kids who should have been enjoying their last day of Christmas vacation were wading through the mud. Residents here were notified of the impending disaster just after midnight on New Year's Eve. They left immediately, taking little with them. But the water did not even reach the complex until hours later. One man says that time could have been used to pack and carry out at least some of his belongings.
I can understand them wanting to save people, but on the other hand, a lot of things were lost that wouldn't have had to be lost.
Still, most victims are happy their children, neighbors, and pets are safe. They'll keep scraping, shoveling, and cleaning up until their lives are back to normal.
Take a hard knock and come back up and say, we're going to do it.
Engineers and federal investigators inspected what's left of the dike today. They're considering several possible causes, but they won't know precisely what happened until they complete a more comprehensive study.
News specialist Robert Walls has been covering this story since early Sunday morning. He joins us now live from a spot just below the break in the dike. Robert, is everybody just looking now, or can they do anything yet?
Well, some things are being done, Bruce. As investigators and engineers look at the mess, the people who live and work in this area are trying to put things back together. The flood wiped out several bridges that crisscrossed the Virgin River, cutting off traffic flows to Hurricane and parts of Bloomington.
This is sort of our shortcut. It's how the school buses come, and I know that was the big question my children had, was whether they're going to be in school or not.
Some structures are beyond repair. Crews began rebuilding this bridge in Washington today and hope to have traffic on it by tomorrow. Crews built a dike on the inside of Quail Creek Reservoir in an effort to save some of the stored water. More than 26,000 acre-feet of water rushed out of the gaping hole in the dike. Even though the disaster caused a lot of damage, people here want to see the dam rebuilt.
Uses that they were going to put this water to are still going to be used. They don't have much choice.
Water's a problem here in the area, and it's critical in the summer. If we don't have that water and the canal can't produce, well, we've got to dig deep and find some.
And finding water in this desert community could become a problem later this summer, according to St. George City officials who say they were counting on Quail Creek to supply municipal water. Dick and Bruce?
So how long might it take before they determine what caused the break?
Well, it's kind of an unknown. They say it'll at least be a couple of days before they're able to look at all the information. A lot of the things that they would like to look at were washed downstream, unfortunately. So they say it'll be at least a couple of days before they have any indication.
All right, Bob, thank you. The state wants to form an investigative task force to look at this weekend's disaster. Just who will serve in that group remains unanswered today. But many experts believe it's time not only to look at what happened, but why it happened. Our science specialist, Ed Yates, explains.
Why the Quail Creek dike failed may involve more than geology or engineering. According to many experts, Utah has long favored a system that does business with folks you know. Low construction costs and arm twisting from local towns and communities which need the water places a lot of pressure on state agencies. But the Quail Creek disaster may now encourage even more input from outside sources, the kind of technical know-how that addressed concerns, though unfounded, at the Jordanelle Dam site several years ago. The Quail Creek disaster also reveals another dilemma for the state, the fact that there are few, if any, really good sites for dams left in Utah.
Most of the likely places to put in dams, they've got dams. And so the ones that the state keeps looking at tend to be ones that definitionally will have geologic problems. And engineers like to solve problems. And, you know, many people feel you can build a safe dam anywhere. And that's beyond our level of expertise.
Building in less favorable sites increases costs, and sometimes it does require technical know-how outside the state. Everyone knew about the geological hazards at the Quail Creek Reservoir, but Atwood worries about the more subtle hazards and technical